Now we're going to allow the user to complete tasks. So the first thing we're going to need to do is we're going to need to write a helper method so that if the user does complete a task, specifically if they tap on the row in the table view, which will signal that they've completed it, and if they tap it again, it'll uncomplete it, we're going to need to persist those changes to NSUserDefaults. So let's go down to our helper methods, and we're going to write another helper method here. And we're going to say that this method does not return anything, so we're going to do void. And we're going to do update completion of task. And we're going to say cc task. And we're going to say task is going to be the argument. And we're going to say for index path. And we're going to say ns index path. And we're going to add a parenthesis here, and we'll give it the argument name index path. And we can add our curly braces. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create an Mutable Array. We can say task objects as property lists. So hopefully you can guess we're going to be accessing from NSUserDefaults our current array. So we're going to say array for key, and we're going to say task objects key. And we're going to call mutable copy here to transform the array into a mutable array. So we're going to be able to adjust it. And we're going to say if not task objects as property list. So if there was not a current object saved to my task list objects, we're going to go ahead and create one. So we're going to say task objects as property lists is equal to NSMutable array alloc init. So next we need to go ahead and we need to remove the task object from our task objects as property lists. So we can go ahead and we can do task objects as property lists, remove object at index, and we're going to say index path dot row. Well, how is this working? Well, we're getting back our task objects as property lists from NSUserDefaults, and then we're removing the current property list for the index path, for specifically which row the user selected. We're going to be able to access that by saying indexPath.row. We're going to remove that specific object. But don't worry, we're going to re-add another object so that the user is able, so that we're able to adjust the isCompleted property. So we're going to say in our next line of code, if task.isCompleted is equal to yes, well, we're going to update our task. So we're going to say task.isCompleted is equal to no. And where is this task coming from? Well, it's being passed in as a parameter in our method. So we're also going to pass in the task object. So we're also going to add an else below, or we say task.isCompleted is equal to yes. So if it's currently yes, set it to no. Otherwise, it must be no, in which case we should set it equal to yes. And now that we have this updated task object, we can re-add this to our task objects as property lists. So we're going to say task objects as property lists, insert object, and we're going to say self task objects as property lists, and we're going to pass in our task. And we can go ahead and say at index, and we're going to say indexPath.row. So now we can go ahead and save this to NSUserDefaults. So we're going to say NSUserDefaults, standard user defaults, and we're going to say set object, and we're going to save our task objects as property lists. And we're going to go ahead and give it the key task object key. And now we need to synchronize this data, so we're going to say NSUserDefaults, standard user defaults, synchronize. And finally, now that I've updated the information for my task object, let's go ahead and reload our table view, or let's redisplay the information in our table view so that we'll be able to change the table view cell based on whether or not it's completed. So we've changed its property, but we now need to tell the table view to reload its data. So we're going to say self.tableview reload data. So now that we've been able to change the status of our task, we've also been able to persist that by first removing it from my task objects as property lists at a specific index, and then at the same index we reinsert an object. Specifically, we're converting our task object using the method task object as property list and passing in our updated task, and we're inserting that into our task objects as property lists, and then we're saving that by setting our object with the same key and synchronizing it. And then finally we're saying, okay, update my table view. So now we need to go ahead and update the information in didSelectRowAtIndexPath, because this is one we want to trigger whether or not it's completed or not completed. So let's go ahead and scroll to the bottom here, and we need to implement this method. So we're going to do pragmamark, and we're going to say that this is the UI table view delegate methods. And the method we're going to implement is called didSelectRowAtIndexPath. So we can start typing Tableview, subtraction sign Tableview, and let's search for the method named didSelectRowAtIndexPath. So we see that this populates. We can press return here, and we'll be able to fill it in. And let's go ahead and first figure out which task object the user selected. So they did select a row at index path. They selected a row in our table view. And we're going to say cc task. We're going to say task is equal to self.taskObjects. And we're going to get the object at the current index path dot row. And next we can go ahead and we're going to call our method update completion of tasks, and we know that this method will reload our table view, so that'll be great. So we can say self update completion of task. Well, we're going to pass our task object in that we just found, and because this argument expects an NS index path, well, we have one here, we can just pass in our index path. So now that we're calling this, we just need to update one final method, and that's going to be the way in which we display the background colors of our cells. So if it's completed, I think we should have the background color be green. Well, let's scroll up and we can find our self-row at index path, and we're going to adjust this if else. So if our task.isCompleted is equal to yes, let's set the cell.background color equal to UI color green color. And then we'll say else if it's overdue is yes. We're going to say cell.background color is equal to UI color red color, and else the background color will be yellow. So why did I have to use an if and an else if here? Well, we know that if the if triggers is true, specifically the task is completed, then the else if and the else won't evaluate. And it's important for us to put this line of code first, because even if it's an old task, if the user has completed it, we don't care. We don't want to show red, we want to show green. So let's see if this works. Let's go ahead and run our application. And I should be able to click on this, and it comes up as green, and now I can click it again, and now it's no longer completed, and it's in the future, so it's yellow. But let's say I completed one of my older tasks, it's green. Now let's check to make sure our data persistence is working. Let's go ahead and stop our application and rerun it. And now we see that task 3 is still green. So my data persistence is working in terms of updating to NS user defaults. I've been able to update the completion of my task.